Welcome. This is a Public Works podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today I got a treat for you. Her name is Christina Jackson, and she is the Senior Codes Compliance Inspector Supervisor for the City of Newport News in beautiful Virginia. Christina, say what's up to everybody.
Oh, hello, everyone. It's nice to be with you, Joseph.
All right, so the Senior Codes Compliance Inspector Supervisor. That's the title. It's funny because all those words make sense, but you put them together and it just throws me for a loop. So give us a brief rundown of what that title means, what it is, what you're over, and then give us a snapshot of a random Tuesday for Christina.
Okay, so again, my name is Christina Jackson. I am a Senior Codes Compliance Inspector for the City of Newport News, and that details that I am the supervisor for the property maintenance codes inspectors for the City of Newport News. I oversee 14 inspectors. There's two supervisors, myself and another PM supervisor, and we oversee all of the Virginia property maintenance code violations that may arise in the City of Newport News. And what that typically looks like is citing individuals or issuing notices of violations for people who have not maintained their existing structures, whether that be commercial or residential. Also address any nuisances that we may see out in the field, from grass to trash to graffiti. Zoning issues, we do pre-zoning inspections for setback requirements, fencing installations, and accessory structures. A typical Tuesday.
Yeah.
A typical Tuesday. Sorry about that. A typical Tuesday in our line of work is that we come into the office, we look to see what complaints that we may have received through our 311 center, and we schedule out our day. We have to address those new complaints as well as old cases that we've probably already issued notices of violations. Typically, a Virginia property maintenance code violation, you get about 30 days to comply. All other nuisances, they vary from 10 to 30 days. And we are always making contact with the people on the street. We're always engaging citizens. We're always engaging fellow city departments and trying to get compliance with the Virginia Property Maintenance Code and city ordinances.
Interesting. Answer this for me. Like the amount of I guess compliance issues that cross your desk, is it the majority of people calling 311 on like a neighbor or somebody seeing, a random dump site in the middle of town, or is it more so your crews and your, I guess, officers going around and finding certain issues? Like, which one is the majority, if you get what I'm asking?
That's a very good question, Joseph. So I will tell you that our training processes is that it should be 50-50. So what we tell our inspectors is if you get a call about 123 Main Street, you need to go all the way down the street and try to address all the issues, because if one person has noticed a violation at one property, the other ones are going to stick out like a sore thumb. And then we're also a big proponent of equal enforcement. We don't want to appear that we are targeting one individual for a certain type of complaint and just two doors down there's a similar complaint. So that one complaint it could be a 1-for-1, or it could possibly lead to 1 versus 3 more that you find on that street. So what we call those are 360 inspections. And we tell our inspectors, like, look, drive down the street, address any violation that you see that's similar in matter.
I like that concept of 360 inspections because, I mean, it's kind of like sales too. If you're going to drive, 20 minutes to go and see one person, you might as well see some other people on the way, even on the way back. And I'm sure with the 360, like 360 inspection, you look at 123 Main Street, but there might be some other issues on the street. And then that person at 123 Main Street isn't like, hey, you guys are targeting me. You're pinpointing me out, man. You guys are always harassing me, when everybody gets the same kind of treatment on it.
That is correct. We call it equal enforcement. And so where we tie in a lot with Public Works is that if we're on 123 Main Street and we see a situation, well, let's say we see something that involves Public Works like stormwater or solid waste, we have contacts within their within the public works department and their inspectors, and we'll call them like, hey, can you meet me over here and see if this is something you all will address? Is it something that we probably need to cite because somebody didn't maintain their sewage line that connects to the city? Is there a blockage on the city side or on the public residence side? So we work hand in hand a lot with public works in our city, because public works encompasses so many things, from stormwater to right of way to solid waste to waterworks. It all falls under public works.
Sure, sure. And I remember having a code compliance guy on the podcast before, and I want to kind of ask you the same thread of questioning. Who is I wouldn't say the first call, but who are your dials out to more, the majority of? Is it to police, public works, fire? Like, who are you saying, hey, we have an issue on 123 Main Street. Come with us to help assess it, help make sure everything's safe. And then, like you even said just now, how to fix it moving forward, or even how to instruct the city constituent to fix it, to move forward on it.
So one thing that's unique about the City of Newport News, we have something called a neighborhood action team, where we meet every Thursday and we do these neighborhood walks. And while we're doing these neighborhood walks, it helps educate the inspectors on the public works side and on the city side about who's responsible for what, and then to try to address concerns of this particular neighborhood at that time. And so it's very unique. And so because of that, we try to, before we go out in the field, we have like email conversations saying like, hey, this is the situation that we found here. Would this be a public works matter? If so, please make sure somebody is there doing the neighborhood walk so that we can try to address it all at once while we're out there. And so we leave door hangers, we leave door tags, and then we issue a case in our operating system to make sure that we follow up and make sure that it's addressed. Sometimes we like the approach of not piggybacking, because then again, you have that feeling of the citizen feeling like they're being targeted and the city is just coming after them for every little nitbit, every little thing. And so what we do is we try to address it all at once. Everybody sends their notices at the same time. And then with the same expiration date, so that we're all going out there doing our re-inspections similar at the same time, so that people don't feel like, oh, the city is trying to make me look bad with my neighbors because every 5 minutes there's a new city car that's coming here. No, we try to, be citizen friendly, say yes before you say no, or work with the person before you come down hard on them. So like I said, that question is sort of hard to answer because like I said, Newport News is unique to where we always are working with each other and we're doing those neighborhood walks weekly.
Gotcha. That's cool. In regards to training, let's say you have a staff of X amount of people. I mean, like my home, sometimes the weeds get a little out of control, right? You get the rain, you get the sun, and get a little out of control. And sometimes I might not think it's that bad, but the next person might walk by and go, man, that guy needs to get his weeds. So what I'm trying to say is not everybody has the same standard of cleanliness, organization, just in the same standard. So how do you impart that on a staff of, let's say 10, 15, 20 people to make sure that everybody has that same standard? Because there could be two people driving by the same home. One person might see a problem. The other person's like, oh, he's doing all right. So how do you kind of impart that same standard?
So one thing that is very helpful is you have the code to be your guideline. And so the code, the Uniform Statewide Building Code, Virginia Property Maintenance Code, is the minimum standards for someone to maintain their property. And that's what we always try to convey. We're just asking you to do the minimum standards of maintaining your house to where it's safe and can be used, in a safe manner. And so what I always do with my inspectors when I first ride around with them, I take them to one of my worst houses and I'm like, tell me what you see. What would you write this up for? They've never opened up a code book. They know
Uh,
about what we do, but they're not familiar with like the ins and outs of it. And so sometimes they'll point out stuff that, are aesthetics, like the color of the house, or, the gutters is missing, or, just simple stuff, but, or a crack in the driveway. And I'm like, well, we don't we don't monitor ugly. I tell them all the time. We don't cite somebody for ugly. If somebody wants to paint their house the same color as my shirt, by all means, as long as it's not peeling and flaking, they can paint their house pink.
yeah.
Um, and so you try to set those expectations to sort of train your eye to look at it from a code's perspective. What are the what are the minimum standards that this house is not meeting, to where it falls in my scope of authority of issuing that notice of violation. Also, when it comes to tall weeds and grass, like you were talking about, I've worked for different jurisdictions within the 7 cities. I live in Norfolk, Virginia, but I work in Newport News, Virginia. But they're considered Hampton Roads area, 7 cities. And in one part of Hampton Roads, grass can only be 10 inches tall, and others is 12, and some is 14. So
Oh, wow.
you just have to know your scope of authority when you're out there doing the inspections. And a lot of times, Joseph, it's about educating people. People don't know. A lot of times, especially in the season that we seem to be going in now, is that a lot of millennials who've always lived in apartments and who love apartment living, sometimes find themselves thrown into living in a single family home and
Yeah.
not knowing exactly what all that details in the
That's the
upkeep. We also deal with a lot of military. I'm a military spouse, and there's a lot of transient people that are coming in. And so you have some sailors who lived in San Diego, who lived in the high rise and didn't have to worry about nothing, who are now living in, Virginia offers a variety of possibly living in a single family home, and with that comes responsibilities. And so it's just a matter of educating people and letting them know, like, we do this to maintain the health, safety, and welfare of the people who live, use, and occupy the properties that they live in the city of Newport News. And it's just minimum standards. You gotta cut your
Yeah.
grass, because if not, it can harbor rodents, or you can have noxious weeds, and it may not be a problem for you, but for your neighbor and for the person walking down the street, the mailman. You got to have that egress pathway to allow for emergency individuals, personnel, to be able to access your house in the event of emergency. It's all about educating.
Yeah, yeah. I'm one of those millennials. I used to tell my dad all the time, like, I do not want to have to worry about winding up a garden hose.
I tell my husband all the time, I said, our children are going to put us in a home because you made them rake so many leaves their whole life. They're like, I don't want to
See,
rake another leaf.
yeah, and like I just wish I can just put field turf, the astroturf on the whole front. I don't even want a front yard. Kids don't play out there. They play in the backyard. They got a park down the street. I don't
Yes.
want a front yard to take care of because it's too much work.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
digress. So, Christina, tell us how you got into this industry, and then also give me your career path, kind of like where you started. Because again, I want a youngster to listen to your story and go, "Huh, I can mimic my career path off of Christina's." So tell us kind of how you weaved your way into this position for today.
That's a very good question. I started this career when I was 22 years old in Dayton, Ohio. And so one of the unique things about being a code official is that once you get certified, it's your certification. It doesn't belong to the jurisdiction of whoever you work for. It's yours, and it's transferable. And I'm a prime example of that. I started in Dayton, Ohio. I moved to Newport News, Virginia. Got here, got certified per the technical requirements that are part of the Uniform Statewide Building Code. And then I moved from city to city. I went to Norfolk. Again, married a sailor, fell in love. Lived in Norfolk. Rose through the ranks in Norfolk. Was in charge of a lot of programs in Norfolk. And then Newport News asked if, hey, you know what, we have a position up here. I was like, okay, I'll look at it. And I think it's a testament of, the kind of person that I am, that somebody was like, oh, you want to come back and work for us? I didn't leave a a bad taste in their mouth when I left. They all wish me well, and they're still wishing me well. And so I was an accountant and in Dayton, Ohio. And it just so happened that the company, the third party company that I ended up working for, needed a new inspector for a community that they weren't familiar with, but I was because I lived there. And that's how I fell into it. One of my first mentors in Dayton, Ohio, he encouraged me to look at outside of Dayton. And it was like, it's a big world out there. I was a single mother with 3 kids, twins that were 2. And I moved 595 miles away from anybody I knew in my family and came here to Virginia for a better start and, career growth. And here I am 23 years later, a supervisor. I teach the technical training program for Tidewater Community College, which teaches people who are in part of the civil engineer or the construction business certificate that you can get, construction management certificate that you can get from Tidewater Community College, and incorporates the building codes, because I found throughout my career that a lot of people who are engineers and architects, don't open up the building code and don't know nothing about it. And so the organization that I'm also a member of, International Code Council, saw that gap and created the program called Technical Training Program. And when I went back to Tidewater Community College and did an alumni visit, the dean at the time of civil engineering, he was like, it was crazy because you gave your speech and told everybody about what you do, because it's different from day to day. Everybody sort of geared towards me, was like, oh, tell me more. And so he realized that there was a need there, create that course. So I will encourage anybody, a certificate, don't devalue certificates, because I am a prime example of how certificates can be a success, and you can make your career what you want it to look like, even with just getting certifications.
Yeah, no, that's some good stuff. Because I mean, I went the college route, did all that, got the degree and all that, but there was a sense of, I remember like buddies I grew up with, they're getting like certificates for this, certificates for that, and you'd be surprised that like our careers aren't that different than each other. I'm like,
Y'all
bro,
on
like
the
what?
same path.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, what'd you do to get that certificate? Well, you got to put like 18 months in, and you got to test for it or whatever. They get the certificate, but what I love about it is it's a specialization. College these days is more of a generalization. You get a degree, all it says is, hey, I got a degree and I can go pretty much work for any company that says you need a degree to work for us. But a certificate means you specialize in a certain thing, in a certain industry, in a certain career path. And you can, like you said, you can move along in that career path, which is what I love about it, because it's not just sending a kid out into the world saying, all right, you can get hired on doing whatever. Like, no, you found your lane and you continue to progress in your lane by getting those certificates. So
Yes.
that's definitely a good message to speak. And then also, I think it was your professor or that guy who said, hey, we need to create a course around this. Oh,
Yes.
we need some curriculum around it, because
Yes.
a lot of people don't know that, like, like, of course, me and the HOA always bump heads, but when you think about code compliance and how it can keep our community looking good, keep the home valuations up, because I used to live in the city of Oakland, California. You might not be familiar with the city of Oakland, California, but okay, yeah. So it's a nice city. That's where all the black people were like, yeah, city of Oakland. Go there today. Like, who wants to live in Oakland? The property values are still high, but they're not as high as they should be, because of look at how the city has been, I guess, let go in a certain way. And that's where I appreciate that guy saying, you know what, we need to talk more about this, to educate more people about this, because if we have more code compliance people out in the states, in the US, it's going to make for a better place for everybody's community. So I thought that was
A strong code enforcement team, it is invaluable for cities, especially now that you have cities that are sort of teetering between, losing businesses and having to reinvent themselves. Sort of like Oakland just sort of has to reinvent themselves. Like it still has its good bones. It just has to reinvent itself. And code enforcement might be a piece of helping the city reinvent themselves. And so I
Yeah.
tell my students all the time, I'm like, it's so rewarding to work in code enforcement because whether you're a property maintenance inspector, a residential building inspector, commercial inspector, you get to see the transformation of your city happening right before your eyes. You get to speak about those projects to people who are maybe looking to live in your city or don't really know what's going on in your city. You get to brag about what your city is doing and the differences that they're making in trying to make it best for the next generation. As my pastor always says, we're planting a whole bunch of trees that we're never going to sit under the shade from. And that's how I look at code enforcement is that one, that it may be that house that has been sitting there vacant for a long time. The owner has been unresponsive, but the moment that property sells, you're talking to the new owners, you're telling them the expectations, you're telling them what needs to be done to bring the house into compliance and be active on the tax roll, to not be that nuisance to the neighbors, to be a good neighbor to other people, and it's all because of your hard work in code enforcement, and then also too sometimes your partners in planning and zoning and public works.
I like that actionable tip. You said when a property gets a new owner, you get on that new owner and say, "Hey, I know this house looked the way it did for the last 8 years, but since you're the new owner, we got to hold you to a standard." And I, if I was the owner, I'd be like, "Man, why you guys on me? But the house has been this way for 8 years." But I get it, and I appreciate the actionable tip, and I want to go a little bit deeper into that because and you can go as deep as you want into it or not. But the slippery slope, like I don't want to keep ragging on Oakland, but a city that wasn't as prominent and started to let it slip and slide into a place where not too many people feel safe or just feel like it's actually kept up. Where does that start? Where does that seed internally that starts to denigrate or diminish the quality of, I guess, the code enforcement, which diminishes the quality of the I guess the community? How does that start internally?
So I think part of it is that the city needs to set the expectations to be like, you know, what is lining up to our strategic plan? Because every city has a strategic plan. Every city I've worked for has had a strategic plan. And so maybe it's a point of where the city needs to refocus their strategic plan to have stronger code enforcement, so to re-examine these houses. And then sometimes you need to shake up your code enforcement because many of the staff may have been there 10, 15 years and their eyes have just got trained to look at that property and like, oh, no one's ever going to do anything with it. Well, maybe there needs to be a shakeup amongst the staff because the person who's working the east side of the city now it's moved to the west side of the city and they're looking at things with a fresh eye. So sometimes you need those fresh eyes to come in there and be like, oh, okay, well, this is how we need to address this. And how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So sometimes it takes you going to one street. When I worked in Norfolk, I was strategic about cleaning up a certain area, but I targeted one house. And I said, if I can get this one house to fix their broken windows, paint their house, fix their broken stairwell, it will do wonders for everyone else because it's just like, it's the mindset. If I see one person doing something like my husband with his peer pressure for cutting grass. If he hears one neighbor cutting grass, guess what my husband's about to do? He's about to get up and go cut the grass. Yes, it's that neighbor peer pressure, but it
Yeah,
works.
yeah,
It works.
yeah.
I have seen it in my career where it works, and then when code enforcement starts to get other people to work, then that's when your neighborhood improvement folks come in and say, hey, we have grants available for facade improvement or facade grants or block grants. So let me help you with your targeting. So then we can all start partnering and being like, oh, let's target this. Get with Public Works and be like, can you get rid of all these trash cans that don't have lids and they all raggedy and they got holes in them? Because it's the aesthetics. It's the aesthetics. And so once you get one person to buy in, then it's easy to sell it to the rest of the neighborhood. And then it's easy to sell it to other investors, long-term landlords who've been owning property for years and never invested in their properties. Well, then that's when we step up and be like, hey, you know what? You see what's going on down the street? Get on board.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
might cite them for something small, and you be like, well, it's not just you. I've cited everybody because we are we've created a focus area in this area, and we want to see it brought up to a certain standard, and you got to maintain
Yeah.
it to that certain standard.
Sure. Sure. No, I like that. If you're mentoring somebody younger and they're like, Christina, I want to be like you one day, I want to be as sharp and smooth about this whole code compliance thing as you, what would one skill set you would tell that person to get, to attain? Like, what would that one skill set be?
That's a good question. um I would say research.
Okay.
Research the job and what it details. I tell people all the time, especially doing interviews, like, you ever seen the show Hoarders and they say the city told them to come in and clean it up? That's us. That's us.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So if so that's the kind of job it can be. And then sometimes the job is very easy. So you have to you have to honestly, be honest with yourself. Like, can I really handle, you know, do I have enough empathy enough to handle a situation like that? Do I have enough of a backbone to sort of, stand my ground and be like, for life and safety purposes, you have to address this issue. And I'm not going to let it go until the issue is addressed, not only for your sake, but for your neighbor's sake, for the city's sake, holistically. So I always say, do your research. There are plenty of professional organizations out there. Again, I'm a member of International Code Council, which governs and houses all the certifications that you can get to be an inspector. I'm also, so I'm about to rattle off a whole bunch of stuff, Joseph. So I am
Go for it.
the secretary for the National Women in Code Enforcement and Development. This is a great mentoring training program that we have for women in our industry because it is a male-dominated industry. I'm one of the founding members of Women in Code Enforcement and Development for Virginia, past president. I am VBCOA education chair. So Virginia Building of Code Officials Association. It makes up all the building officials, fire officials, permit techs, plans examiners for the state of Virginia. And they all are part of this organization. I'm the education chair. So I have a passion to make sure that I am help molding and educating the next generation of code officials, because we have a lot of new people coming into our field. And so my thing is, do the research, be a part of these organizations. They have student rates, they have non-governmental rates that you can join, and do that initial research. Like, really, is this the job that I really want to do? Because it can become a career. And again, it's all about what you make it. So I say, do the research.
Yeah.
Find out what a building inspector does. Find out what a zoning inspector does.
Yeah.
And it may be your cup of tea.
Yeah, and that's one thing I always tell the young homies. I'm like, if you want to find a job, like, start with an industry, and then whatever industry it is, find that association, like that big event in your city. Like, if it's 500 miles, just drive there, go to that big event, go to that conference, walk the floor, say what's up to people, and just look around and be like, are these my people? Like, are these the kind of equipment I want to be around? Like, is this the kind of vendors? Yeah.
Yes. So I'm a code geek. I can rattle off the code off the top of my head. If the city attorney asked me a question, I was like, oh, that's code section, blah, 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 blah. They were like, you know it by heart. I'm like, that's me, because this is my career. This has been my career. And I love what I do. And in order for some people to even take me seriously, being a woman in this male-dominated field, I have to know that. Because somebody's going to always challenge me because I am a woman. That's just being honest. And so sometimes you have to be quick on your feet to be like, okay, I know what this code section is. You look in this code section, that's what I'm referring to. So like I said, do the research, figure out who's out there. What's the demographics of women in this field? What's the demographics of people of color in this field? what's the job projection for the next 10 years in this field? One thing I can tell you is that, when there's a national disaster in your area, be it a hurricane, tornado, or whatever, your code enforcement people are the ones who are reporting back to the governor saying that this much of the property has been damaged. And then that's what the governor used to
Oh,
declare a state of emergency, give the
wow.
information to FEMA to get the funds necessary. That's what code enforcement does. And so, it's just one of those things you just have to see like, okay, these are my people.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Shoot, if you don't report a good enough number, you don't get the FEMA check and all this, and people mad at FEMA, but it could be code compliance.
or it could just be the numbers that was reported. And so
Yeah,
if you don't
yeah,
have the next generation of people who care about the places where they live and make sure that the properties are safe, we have 3D housing that is coming, fast and furious. You have a lot of solar panels and
yeah,
electric cars that are coming into the industry. The industry is changing, and we have to have individuals that are coming behind us to be like, okay, the old way of doing things may need to be adjusted, but we need to be looking into this new technology to make sure that we're not losing the structural integrity of buildings,
yeah,
and it's lessening the strength of our codes by putting some of these materials in our houses, or
yeah.
how to incorporate it with the code. Not to say that it's bad, but how to incorporate it with the code.
Yeah. How are you guys using AI yet? Like, is there a way satellite or a drone could take a picture of a house or a street, find if the weeds are 11 inches too tall or whatever, and then send it back?
That's our uh, during COVID, there were some inventive ways that they were doing inspections, but some of that has been pulled back a little bit just because it's just not, that
Yeah,
people element. There are some things that AI and your your drones might miss.
yeah,
And so, that's where that person element is. I go physically, my inspectors physically go to a property, look at the situation, see what needs to be addressed. Then they issue a notice violation, and then they physically go back out to make sure that it has been addressed. It gives people that other sense of the city cares about where they live at, and also gives them that sense of, okay, these people are making sure that everything's been done to code.
yeah, yeah. And that's kind of why I always felt, women would be good code compliance officers because it's more that empathy side of things. Like, if you go to Big Mama's house and she hasn't had nephew mow her grass because nephew's on a vacation, like, don't cite her. Have a little empathy and go, okay, nephew's gonna be back next week. He's gonna mow the grass then, versus just hitting her with the however cha-ching amount of money, which adds
Yes.
up over time on a fixed income. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes. We always talk about ownership. Have ownership of your work. And
mm,
that ownership includes making sure that you sometimes have to go the extra mile to make sure that you've probably done the whole work, looked at the whole picture, knock on that
yeah,
door, see what's going on, find out
yeah,
why the grass isn't cut, find out
yeah,
maybe they're having it, some people may not even know that their sewage is backed up, and we see it when we're out there doing an inspection. Public Works calls us and says, "Hey, they have a sewage backup," and we go knock on the house, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't know," you know. And so then you have to start educating them on what it is going to take to come into compliance.
yeah, yeah. All right, I need a story from Christina when
Okay.
something went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
Oh Lord, there's so many stories. Um, Something that went wrong on my watch. I don't want to say something that went wrong, but just lessons that I have learned.
Yeah, just
Yes,
something, an instance where somebody who's listening to this and they, bumped their heads, as if we all have, we all bumped our heads and,
yes.
and messed some stuff up, to where they feel they're not alone and like saying, oh man, I screwed up, but I learned from it, and I want everybody else to learn from
So this wasn't a screw up. This was
it.
just one of those moments where I got you get frustrated. There was a situation where the well, let me back up. My first inspection in Ohio, where I had to condemn a property, and the people didn't have no place to go. and they had moved from Pittsburgh to Ohio, and they were they had given all their money to this landlord, and they just couldn't. They were like, "We have no place to go," and I literally went out to my truck, called my boss, and was like crying uncontrollably, like, these people have no place to go. I don't know what to do. Oh my God. And so my boss allowed me to get it all out off my chest. And she said, let me tell you the aspects of this job. She said, the aspects of this job is that there are going to be these situations that are going to come up where you feel helpless and helping people. And I said, what does that mean? And she says, is the situation unsafe? I said, yes, they have water coming into their electrical lines. She said, so if you don't take the action that you take and they stay in that house and electric goes wrong and there's a fire and there's a casualty, that happened on your watch. And she was like, so you may feel helpless helping somebody, but you are helping them because our job is to maintain the life and safety and welfare of people living in properties. And if the conditions warrant that I have to condemn a house to unfortunately displace somebody, we try to reach out to the Red Cross and other agencies and churches to see if there's something available. But at the end of the day, my violation is against the property and not the people. And so the property was substandard. And that's the reason why I had to take the action that I had to take. And so once I wrapped my head around that, like, oh, okay, I have to protect the people. This is part of me protecting the people is, sometimes displacing people. And as hard as that may be, and sometimes is the situations are different. That's my job. I have to make sure that the people are safe. And once I'm made aware of an unsafe condition, I have to address it.
Yeah, yeah. I'd probably have to ride around with a sticky note that says the property, not the person,
Yes.
just so I can keep that on top of mind because I'd probably screw that up every day.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah,
tough.
yeah. It really is. It was tough, but once I because there's been some times where I put someone out, and then the very next day something bad happened at the house, and I was just like, oh, thank you, Lord. Whew, yes,
Not on my
yes,
watch.
yes. I did what I was supposed to do. I followed my scope of authority within the code, and you know, you kept someone from harming themselves by staying in an
Yeah,
unsafe structure.
sure, sure. What's Christina's personal and professional development regimen like? And you listed all the associations, but what do you do actionably to keep learning and to keep your sword sharp in this ever-changing industry?
Oh my goodness. Meeting new people, networking. I am a network person. I love to meet new people. I love to understand people where they're coming from. So that's one of the things that I keep sharp on. And like I've been going around explaining to other organizations who've asked me to come speak, is that I'm a person that I put my money where my mouth is. If you want me to be your mentor, if you want me to follow up with you, guess what? Christina's gonna follow up with you. You're gonna get that email from me. You're gonna get that follow up checkup email from me saying, "Hey, how's it going? What's going on?" I've had Zoom calls with people to help them study and get best prepared for certifications because their job may be on the line and they need to have it. That's the kind of person that I am. I want to make sure that you know my grandma said your name is worth something, and I don't want to have a bad name because it's worth something. So I want to make sure that when someone mentions my name in a sentence, you're not throwing mud. And of course, I'm not for
Yeah,
everybody. So there's going to be some
yeah,
people that are like, I don't like that little girl. I don't know. They might say
yeah.
that. But for the most part, I think that, I really do try to leave a positive impact about what it is that I do and how it's been beneficial for my life, my kids' life, my husband's life, and that I love what I do.
Yeah, and speaking of being likable, nobody wants to see the code compliance person pull up in front of their home. Nobody. I don't care. Nobody. It's never like, "Hey, code compliance saying I'm doing a great job." Nobody, never. So, how do you keep a positive attitude, keep a smile on your face, and stay likable when nobody wants to see you coming?
I think it's all about being consistent in doing your job. So, like I try to tell my inspectors, always have your intro ready. Hello, my name is Christina Jackson. I'm the Senior Coast Compliance Inspector for City of Newport News. I am here because we received a complaint, and my job is to see whether or not a complaint exists or not, whether there is a complaint there. And if there is, we will have to address it, and we will work with you on how to address it. Once you sort of like set the tone and say and let people know, like, well, I may be here in a negative light, but I'm also here to work with you. You give that give and take, and people appreciate that give and take. And so a lot of times, if you just are straight with people up front, because some people may not like you. You just tell them up front, like, hey, look, this is what I have to do. I'm not saying that a violation exists. I'm here to see if there is one that exists. And if it is, then we have to address it. And so typically, 80% of the time, you get a good response. 20% of the time, you could say, you could be as nice as pie, the sweetest individual you want to be, but some people just aren't going to understand, and you just have to make sure that you've made it clear what the violations are, what's going on, and then you like, you'll receive a notice in the mail. If you have any questions, here's my card. I'm still giving out my card. I get voicemails sometimes that aren't pleasant, but you still give out your card. You treat everybody the same.
All right, Christina, let's say I asked your husband's best friend, what does Christina do all day? What is her job description? What value does she provide to the community? What would he get totally wrong in answering that question?
My friends always tell me, quit inspecting my house when you walk in my house. So I'll be like, I know that plug is loose, right? I need to fix that plug. And they be like, Christina, no, like, no, y'all need to fix that plug. And they be like, no. So that's what they would say I do all day,
Gotcha.
There's been some cases that have been public, and they're like, that was you? And I'm like, yes. And so you go into a little explanation as to what it is that you do. And I'm like, that's my job. It's part of what I do, and to make sure that people are safe. So they'll tell you, like, oh, she's a building inspector, and she manages people to tell them what they need to do with their house. So
How's
that's what they would
Christina?
say.
Yeah, how's Christina on like a road trip or vacation? You and your family, let's say you're in the Bahamas. Are you looking around, looking at all the infractions, or can you just
Absolutely.
have some peace and chill out?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I tell my husband all the time, it's like, what we won't do is stay someplace that ain't code compliant. I'll tell you that now. Walk up in there, because I will get on the elevator, and I'm like, where's the sign that says where the certificate is?
Oh,
It ain't posted in here. And he'd be like, can you stop? I'm like, absolutely not. Somebody had better looked at this elevator we getting on here. You go into the room, if the plumbing is running all kind of crazy, or if
yeah.
the AC ain't working properly, I'm like, go downstairs.
Gosh.
Tell me we gotta go somewhere else. We recently just ran into that. We stayed in a hotel in Northern Virginia, and the fire alarm system kept going off, but it just kept going off in our room. And I'm like, so after 20 minutes, I'm like, somebody should have came here and reset this by now. And they're like, oh, we don't have the staff. I said, well, we need our money back. We're gonna go stay at a hotel that has a monitor system on their fire alarm, because you're supposed to have a monitor system. He was like, look, should have called somebody, because the one thing about Miss Jackson is that we stay somewhere in Virginia, 9 times out of 10, I know the building.
You know somebody. Gosh, we can't take Miss Jackson anywhere. What would you say is like the most, I wouldn't say infamous, so the most frequent, text or call you get from family and friends around the city? Like everybody, whoever knows somebody that works for the city feels like they got a bat line. Like, I got a guy who works for the city. I call, he get it figured out for me.
Yes.
What's the most, I guess, common request you get from family and friends?
Grass.
Oh,
Grass. I don't work for the city that I live in anymore. But my neighbors, they knew that I used to work for them. And so they like, oh, you still know somebody who work over there. Can you tell them to come and site their house down the street? Because they got tall weeds and grass. I'm like, oh my goodness. I was like, okay.
Don't twist my arm too hard. Yeah.
Right.
All right, good stuff. All right, let's say you're commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is in the most trafficked area of Newport News. What ask of your community in regards to code compliance would you put on this billboard?
Don't be afraid to call codes compliance. A lot of people sometimes we run into where they don't call because they feel like they're going to get retaliation from their landlord, and you call codes on me, you call the city on me. They'll do that. So don't be afraid to call us.
Okay.
Because all we can do is say it's a violation or not, and per the Virginia statutes, you cannot not have a code.
Yeah. Huh.
You cannot be I'm sorry. You cannot be retaliated if you call codes compliance.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, I didn't phrase that right, but that's what I was trying to say.
Understood. And how would like a city constituent find the code? Like, because you said there could be 10 inches grass, 11 inches grass, 14 inches grass. How do you find that PDF or I'm sure it's like a Bible? How do you find that, to know if you're code compliant or not, or if your
That's
landlord?
a very good question. It's a website called Municode, MUNICODE. You go to Municode, you go to your state, and then you can find your city. And you can look up the cities. You can look up all the ordinances for that city, from their public works ordinance, zoning ordinance, police ordinance, all of it, codes ordinance. It's all there. So you go to Municode and then you just type in Newport News. There's a search bar and you can type in grass and it'll take you right to the code section and tells you what grass is, what the requirements are.
Wow. So thanks for that. I'm sure a lot of people don't know exactly how to find that, and I didn't either. So thank you for that.
No problem.
All right, let's say I'm coming to Newport News and I text you ahead of time. I say, hey, Christina, where can I go to get the best burger in Newport News? Where are you going to send me?
Whataburger on Jefferson Avenue.
You said Whataburger?
Yep, on Jefferson Avenue. It's a local staple. I came back to Newport News. I sort of had forgot about it. And then my coworker, we stopped there and ate. And I was like, oh, this place is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Whataburger it is. All right, Christina, thank you for hopping on the show with us today. Thanks for all your wealth of information and knowledge. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Christina, any final words before we get out of here?
No, thank you, Joseph, for interviewing me. I'm a podcast host as myself, and so it's different being on the other side of it. I understand what people be saying about. I'd be so nervous. I'm like, okay, but yeah, I can understand that now. So thank you for the opportunity to share with your listeners about the great career that code enforcement can be.
Sure thing. You guys are doing the Lord's work out there. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Christina, thanks for hopping on.
All right.